Today I've come to talk to you about color, because we live in kind of a magical digital world of color where any color you want you can just dial up in Photoshop using your sliders. But it didn't always used to be that way. Historical artists were stuck in the time that they were born in. They only had access to the tools and the chemicals available in the years that they were working. One of the first chemical colors to be discovered and used throughout art is called cochineal, or red. It's a bright, beautiful red. And it's made out of beetles. It's made out of beetles, which are parasites on certain types of cactuses, and they can only be harvested every 2 weeks out of every year. So not so easy to make it. This very same color is not used in painting anymore, but it's still used in makeup as a food dye, in makeup and food as a dye for red color. One of the things that I think that is really interesting about red is that it's one of the first colors to be named as every culture progresses. As most cultures progress, they invent names for colors in a fairly predictable pattern, and red, perhaps because it's the color of blood, is really named first. So it's really emotional, and it's a very powerful color to use. Another historical color that's interesting is Tyrian purple. This was used in Greek and in, like as early as 2300, I think, BCE in Greece. And it was a beautiful purple. Only royalty was allowed to wear it. It was very expensive because the way that they made it was they would get like 300 pounds of shellfish. This particular type of shellfish was only available in present-day Lebanon. So you get 300 pounds of shellfish and you put it out by the beach with some hot water and you allow it to ferment for like a couple of weeks until you can extract 1 ounce of dye for your purple toga. So that may be why today we think of purple as the color of royalty. One thing that's interesting about purple too is that the Tyrian purple, through the process I described, the garments that were dyed purple tended to retain the smell of the shellfish that had been used to make it. So look great, smell maybe not so good. But you were purple, so that was awesome. Another color that was used in historical times was lead white. And this was made by soaking strips of lead in vinegar and then covering them up with dung, putting that in a pot and letting it ferment for months. And so they would make paint and also makeup out of this lead. Lead's pretty poisonous, and the people in the 1800s who used it on their faces tended to die. That was bad. Another thing that's interesting about it as a paint is that because it was used from about the 1900s and before, it was in the 1900s that we discovered that titanium would make a pretty good replacement for white. If you have an X-ray machine, you can look at various layers of old paintings because, lead and X-rays. Or you can find forgeries that are made with the modern paint and not the old lead white. So let's go back a minute and talk to ourselves about what is color. Here we have a lovely color spectrum, and beyond the visible colors, beyond what we can see, there's also infrared and X-ray. There are energy wavelengths that we just can't perceive with our eyeballs. So that's pretty cool. But we're smart humans. We can make machines that can go see other colors. What we have here is an infrared view of Messier 101. It's one of the galaxies in the sky. And with this infrared camera from a space camera, then we can see a much different view of it. Here's the same galaxy in visible light. So we get a lot more information depending on which light we use. Here's the same galaxy with X-ray light, or an X-ray view of the same galaxy. And then we can put all of those wavelengths together to get a really good image of the whole galaxy, really informative image if we use just the colors we can't see. All of the color types that I've talked about so far, that's using the additive color model, and that's all about emitted light beams. This is light that comes down from the sun, it comes from a source. It's here right now from the lights, or if we go outside, it's emitted light. If you mix different colors together, if you mix, the yellow and the green, if you mix the red and the green, you get yellow. If you mix them all three together, then you get white. So that's additive color. And that's on all of your screens, your tablets, your computers, projectors like this. It's primarily a red, green, blue type of color. There's a different color model which is used for things like t-shirts, printed posters, business cards, material. And because they're different color models, they're never going to look exactly the same. Subtractive color is all about what is reflected off of the material that you print something on. So we make an ink or a pigment, and then we lay that down on a piece of white, and then the light reflects only certain colors. So it's cyan, magenta, yellow, and red all mixed together to make black, hopefully. Yeah. Cool. So how do we humans even see color? Well, we've got our eyeballs, and our eyeballs have different cones in them. Most people have 3 cones, one for sensing blue, one for sensing green, and one for sensing red. And that's cool. That's a diagram of the wavelengths of various colors. Dogs only have 2 cones. They can only sense yellow and blue cones. So perhaps that's why your dog Fido just runs right past that ball in the grass that you throw, because if it's a red ball and green grass, Fido can't tell the difference. It's pretty much the same. There are other animals that have way more cones. They can see a multitude of colors. Butterflies have like 5 cones. And there's this thing called the mantis shrimp that has, we're not sure, but somewhere between 12 and 16 different light sensing cones. Can you just imagine how crazy it would be to see 16 different colors all at once? Wow, that'd be cool. But I talked about how most humans have 3 cones. Not everybody has all of the cones working or fully functional. 4% of humans, so that means maybe 8 people in this room right now can't see all of the colors. 8% of men and 0.5% of women in the world have some form of color blindness. Maybe the cones aren't there, they're not working, maybe they can't see green at all, or maybe it's just a scale. So it's probably important to think about supporting these users, because you probably support some browsers that are even less than 4% of your traffic. It's most common to have deuteranopia, which is an inability to see green colors, and less common is red inability sensing, which is called protoanopia. And it's also possible to be missing the blue cone. That's very uncommon. Complete color blindness, seeing everything in grayscale, that's very, very uncommon in humans. So here's a door lock that I've simulated using deuteranope vision in Photoshop. Is this door locked or unlocked? You can't tell. So here it is. Oh, it's locked now. Great. We can tell it's locked because we can see red, most of us. So it's important to remember when you're making something that color is a progressive enhancement, but data and affordances need to be there before you can layer color on top of that. So let's take a look at a site. Perhaps you've seen this one. Perhaps you've checked already. Oh, here it is with deuteranope vision, again using Photoshop. It's pretty easy. It looks good. Great, good work. Here's another site. Perhaps you've seen this one. This is Can I Use, which they use green to say if a browser supports a certain CSS3 feature, and they use orange to mean, support's not so good. And red, they mean no support at all. So again, this is Can I Use. It's a great site, really. But it doesn't look so good with deuteranope vision. Not so helpful. What are you going to do? Well, they've given a pretty good solution. They have an alternate color theme that when you go find it in the settings, you can set up and say, oh, okay, I want to have the accessible color design on this. And then you can go, oh, okay, purple means no support, and kind of pale green means completely supported. And here's how that would look with deuteranope vision. It's discernible. It's not great. It's not great. Well, what can we do that might be better in our designs? Well, instead of using just color, add shape. You can add, like X's or crosses or triangles inside the color dots, or you can put borders on the edges of things to differentiate them with shapes. Much better. And the thing, with anything in accessibility, this is going to help not only the users who have color sensing difficulties, it's going to help everybody. Because even in dark light, I would have problems telling the difference between blue and purple in those squares. But I can always see the difference between octagon and square. So, something to think about. Also, you should test your sites, because you'll never know how it's going to look unless you go looking for trouble. The easiest way to test is using Photoshop. It has, right in the proof settings, it's got options for deuteranope and protanope vision. So you just go and set the proof up, and then you can flip the proof colors on and off right in Photoshop. There are also a couple of ways that you can test a whole site or a whole browser if you've already made something. There's an add-on for Firefox called Colorblindness, and that's pretty easy to use when I tested it. You do have to go into the Tools, Web Developer menu, and then Responsive Design View, and it's one of the filters in the Responsive Design View in Photoshop. There's also an add-on for Chrome. If you like Chrome, there's two. I tested Spectrum. Spectrum's super easy to use. I haven't tested color blinding, but it's open source, so yay. And there's also an application for your whole computer you can download called Color Oracle, which will let you do the entire machine, just simulate color blindness on the entire machine. So that's a good way to test, so please test. Let's take a look at a way that your brain maybe messes with your perception of color. Have a look at the A and the B squares here. Yeah? Which one's brighter? Looks pretty obvious. Oh, no, I lied. I tricked you. A and B are exactly the same shade. It's just that your brain corrects for this shadow cast by the green cylinder and makes you think, well, B must be much lighter to be the same as A. So your brain sometimes tricks you when you see color. Let's talk about another color illusion that you might have seen on the internet recently. This thing. Yeah, good. Everyone still remembers this. I'm sorry for bringing back old traumas, but there's this thing. So one thing that is important to understand is about color constancy. For example, if you see a cherry, you know cherries are red. Cherries are always red. So even if you take a box of cherries into some weird lighting, your brain is going to tell you those cherries are always red, even though their color may not actually be red if you were to use Photoshop to pick the colors out of there. So here is the first demo. I'm not going to go too heavy because it's early stat, but what I did is I set up a SVG out of the dress. You may know that SVGs are just a vector markup format for describing graphics, and you can do it in the browser. What's great about SVGs? I can style them with Sass, so no problem. So I've given one group the kind of dress shape, and then another group, the lace. That's going to be the horizontal stripes on this thing. And then I've used Sass to set up some variables. Like I've set up just that the dress color is this RGB value, and then I address the dress and give it a fill of the dress color, because with SVGs you fill instead of setting background color. So here's the dress when it looks its most white. And the reason it looks the most white in this second slide is that I've used a background color of blue. With a deep blue background color, your brain attempts to subtract all of the blue that it thinks is ambient light. Thus, you're probably going to end up with a dress that's white with gold. Okay, here's the same dress with a yellow background, bright overblown yellow. And we just use a different background color. It's a lovely yellow background color. Your brain attempts to subtract yellow from the dress, resulting in a blue with black stripes dress. So that's the dress demo. I have a confession. I saw it as blue and black in the beginning, and I can never, ever see anything but I know that that's not everybody's view, and that's because of the color constancy that I described earlier. One thing that artists do when they're painting or drawing or something is when they want to make a color and have highlights and shadows to it, they take that color and then they literally mix blue or white paint or pigment in with that. Because in the real world, color and shadows aren't always just black or just white. They're kind of a shade or a tint of the original color of the thing. And so the good news is that we can do the same thing with SAS. So here's the second demo. This is some more SVGs. There are just 9 triangles here, and there's 3 different peaks. They're mountain peaks, and then each of the peaks has 1 triangle for highlights and 1 triangle for shadows. So what I've done is I've given the mountains some lovely green color. I picked the same green, and I said, well, for the one in the middle, that's just that green, and then the one that's a little bit front, it's lighter, so I lightened that color a little bit, and then the one in the back, I darkened that color a little bit using SAS. Then I said, well, the highlight color is white, and the background color is CSS black, and then I just used the stroke to make an outline of those SVGs. So that's how I've colored all of the mountain peaks and all of the shadows and highlights. It's okay, it looks like mountains. It's kind of harsh. What if instead we mix those greens into our dark and our light colors? Yeah, it's pretty better looking. So what I did was I changed the variable. So I've used mix to mix some of my original mountain color in with white, and same thing to mix a little bit in with black. That's great, cool, that's pretty cool. Much better looking than white and black as far as realistic mountain peaks go. What if we want to have a lovely orange sunset? Well, that's easy. We're just going to mix in a little bit of the orange instead of the green. So what I did is I set up a color and I said, okay, well here is the highlight orange. I want to lighten or darken it a little bit. And then I mixed those into the original colors that I've used on the outlines. Oh, cool. Pretty great. Not so bad. You might be asking yourself, why did I use mix when I showed you folks a perfectly good lighten and darken function before? And the answer is that one of the things that SAS will do when you use lighten or darken is it goes, okay, well, I'm going to put 50% white in here, and on a very white color, like the pink or the orange in the top, it very quickly blows out all the way to white, so you can't see it anymore. Same thing for darken. On a darker color, darken very quickly blows out all the way to black. But mix allows us to have a fluid scaling in between the different colors that we're using, because we can say, okay, I want 90% original color and 10% of white, mix those together, and you can just go all the way across the scale. So if you want a more finer division of color, use mix for SAS rather than light or dark. Cool. Let's talk about distance and photographs. For example, in a photograph, what makes the mountains in the background here look farther away than the mountains in the foreground? Well, sure, the mountains in the background appear smaller. They're kind of smaller in the frame. They're maybe a little higher up because we're looking out to the world and we see things go up. And another thing that's interesting about the mountains in the background in this photograph is that they have much less color, or much less contrast, much less saturation to them. The exact same thing happens in paintings. In this painting, there are mountains in the background, and even though it's just dots of paint on a canvas, they appear farther away because of the same tricks. They're a little bit smaller. They're a little bit lower contrast. They're just kind of a little bit faded out in the background. The same thing happens in a picture of sunset, except everything in the back is a little bit oranger. And all of this fading to blue or orange happens because there's more sky in between you and the thing that's very far away. So in like high noon, it'll be a little bit more blue because that's the atmosphere then. But in sunset, it'll be a little bit more orange. This is what artists call atmospheric perspective. And that's just more stuff in between you and the thing. It's actually air that you're seeing. So that's pretty cool, I think. So of course I made a demo about it. So here's some more SVGs. And again, I am not showing you the entire SVG because these are pretty gnarly, but there are two groups of SVGs that I've grouped using the group element. One has a class of sail, and that's the lovely red stuff. Those are the sails for my boat here. And then the other group of SVGs in the hull group, that's, you know, the main body of the boat. And then, oh, okay, yeah. So we've got sail and hull in a group, and we can style all of those SVGs as one block. Then the same thing, I set up a color variable to make the sail a lovely little red. And there's a hull variable that's kind of a brown. And then I fill the sail with the sail color, fill the hull with the hull color. So here we have the sail and the hull looking a little farther away. You're going to have to imagine for me, please, that these are smaller and farther up in the frame, because I still wanted you to be able to see them on the projector. But what I've done is I've changed the color for each of them by mixing in a little bit of sky blue. Sky blue is another CSS named color, so that was super convenient. So yeah, we just mix in 70% of the sail color with 30% of the sky blue color, same for the hull. And you know, the hull, it looks pretty good, it looks further away, but that sail, it looks a little funky. That's a little bit not so good. We're gonna change that up. What we're going to do instead on the sail color is we're going to mix the sail with the complement of itself. And this is a Sass color function. I'll walk you right through it. On the inside of the fill line, we have a complement of sail, and complement just spins the color around 180 degrees along the color wheel to pick the opposite. For example, yellow is the complement of green. So we just picked the complement of whatever color sail was, and then we mix sail with the complement of itself by about 70%. And that gives us kind of a more faded, slightly darker red that in this example is more effective for the sail color than mixing in the blue color. So we talked about a couple of tricks that artists use. We talked about using complement, and we talked about using mix. And if you want any of the links to any of the demos, you can grab them from this link here, or you can grab them from my Twitter account. And that is some facts about color. Great. Thank you very much.